Everyone, welcome to What's Growing On. We are so happy to have you today. My name is Dorothy Jordan. I am with AARP Alabama, and we are recording this, so please just keep that in mind, that this is being recorded, and we will probably post it on YouTube and Facebook at a later date. But I want to welcome everybody and thanks for coming. This is our kind of our gardening at home series. And so Terrence, who is with Victory Teaching Farm, has been my co-host for since the pandemic. We've been doing this since the pandemic, and she is with Victory Teaching Farm down here in Mobile. And we are really excited because we have been doing a couple of kind of going off the beaten path of home gardening, but and talking about different things. So we're really excited to have a great show for you guys today on the history of medicinal plants. So it's just going to be a fun, fascinating broadcast today with a very special guest. So right before we get started, just want to give you a reminder, we're AARP Alabama, and what we do, we are very lucky to empower people to choose how they live as they age. We're nonpartisan. We have over 420,000 members in Alabama, and my job is the best job in the world because I get to do outreach. So I get to do fun things like educational stuff, fraud prevention, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. And just another reminder that we are being recorded. So if you're attending, you are consenting to being recorded. Also, we do have the chat, so please feel free to ask any of your questions. I have the chat up and I'm going to be monitoring it while we are going. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will jump in and ask those to our guest. And at the end, we will have a question and answer session. So you are more than willing to take yourself off of mute at that time. And just a real quick disclaimer here today. We are going to be talking about the history of medicinal plants, which is really, really exciting and really interesting. But just remember, this is for educational entertainment purposes only. None of us are physicians by any means. So we're not giving any medical advice here. And of course, before you start any kind of medicine regimen or fitness regimen or anything like that, always talk to your personal physician. So just a little reminder there. So I am really delighted to have our guest, Dr. Darren Glassbrook with the Mobile Medical Museum. He has been the executive director of the Mobile Medical Museum since February of 2016. And under his leadership, the museum has launched several successful programming initiatives, including the Mobile Community Health Leadership Awards, Junior Med Camp, and the Robert Thrower Medicinal Garden, which we'll be talking about today. And Dr. Glassbrook has also curated the special exhibitions, Different and Fit, Eugenics in Alabama. And hold on just a second, y'all. I'm sorry. It's summer. My child is right here. So give me just a second. Deepest apologies, folks. Sorry about that. And Darren, I'm so sorry to have interrupted. So Darren is, like I said, the executive director of the Mobile Medical Museum. He has done some amazing work there with the Eugenics in Alabama exhibit, the 100 Years of Insulin. And I was actually fortunate to tour the museum during that exhibit, and it was pretty fascinating. Let's see, Where Does It Hurt? The Enduring Mystery of Pain, Dreaming at Dawn, African Americans and Healthcare, 1865 to 1945, and just a myriad of other great exhibits. He's spent 14 years in the nonprofit sector here in Mobile at the Center for the Living Arts. now the Alabama Contemporary Art Center, the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Arts, and the Nevada Museum of Contemporary Art. And he completed his graduate studies in American literature at Purdue University, where his education included graduate seminars in historical studies and archival theory and practice. His writings on medical history have appeared in A History of Mobile and 22 Objects and Nursing Clio. So we are very fortunate again to have Dr. Darren Glassbrook with us today. Darren, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, I apologize for that interruption of a little one. So
Thank you, Dorothy. It's good to be here. No apologies necessary. I know what that's like. So
thank you. Thank you. Well, by all means, please take it away. Let me know when I need to change slides. And again, friends who are listening, watching, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'll be happy to moderate that for us.
okay. Well, I just want to start with a short introduction about the Mobile Medical Museum, because it is one of Mobile's smaller museums, and so a lot of people out there have still not heard about us, but we have actually been around for quite a long time. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary, the 60th anniversary of our founding by Dr. Sam Eichholt II. The museum is a private nonprofit 501c3 organization. We have our own governing board. We're not affiliated with USA Health System or the City of Mobile or any other public or private entity. Since 2003, we have used the Vincent Doan House, which is pictured on the left, as our home. That house is owned and maintained by the University of South Alabama, and so we have a lease agreement with them to use the house for our exhibits and programs. And that view of the house is what you will see driving by or walking by on Spring Hill Avenue. So we're on the grounds of the USA Children's and Women's Hospital in Midtown Mobile, 1664 Spring Hill Avenue. We do have public hours that you can see on our website and on our Facebook page. We do lots of public programs, exhibits, tours, summer camp, and the medicinal garden is part of our educational programming. And you can see the front view of the garden that borders the front of the house on each side. And then the picture on the right is one of our beds, the eastern bed that deals with the history of herbal plants used by midwives that I'll get to in a second. One more thing about the Vincent Doan House. It's actually the oldest house that is still standing in its original location. It was built in 1827 by a merchant by the name of Captain Benjamin Vincent. And it's on the National Register of Historic Places. And it's a very cool house. It's built in the French Creole architectural style, which is pretty distinct in Mobile. I think it's the oldest example. You usually find this type of architecture only remaining in Louisiana, but the Vincent Doan House is one of those living examples, and we do architectural tours from time to time. And the garden, I can't say for sure, but it's very likely that the house had a garden such as this, maybe not in the exact location, but definitely on the grounds near the house. since that was a major part of home health care at the time. Okay, next slide, please.
That's really fascinating about, I didn't realize that the house was that old, and yeah, I guess
Yeah,
they probably did have a garden very similar to this, so.
that's right. So at the time, uh, there were very few physicians of any kind, but particularly formally trained and schooled physicians were extremely rare in this part of uh, North America, um, and the United States. And so most of the healthcare that was done at the time was performed by non-professional women, mothers, grandmothers, midwives working in the home, working from um, manuals and recipe books that were handed down. And they were in charge of delivering babies, taking care of the sick and the elderly. They would only call in a physician if one was available and if it was a matter of life and death. And you may, some of you have read Jane Austen or authors from that period, that might sound familiar to you. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the progression of the Robert Thrower Medicinal Garden. First of all, where does the name come from? It's named after a really great man from the Porch Creek Indian community who was an ethnobotanist and historian, cultural historian for the Porch Creek Indian community in Atmore. And he was an advisor to the museum before he passed away several years ago. And so in his honor, we named the garden after him.
Wonderful. That's good. I did not know that. So
Yeah, and he had a wealth of information about medicinal herbs that fortunately he has passed on to his family, such as his daughter Sahoy Thrower, who has given talks for us before.
that's great. And that's really what's so fascinating about the history of medicinal plants, and like what you're going to be telling us today, because a lot of it is it's brought down through oral history, and a lot of it is through the indigenous native people, and that's a great connection to have, and such valuable information to have access to.
That's right. And I should mention that the Porch Creek Indian community gave us some really important grant assistance to help get this project off the ground. And so we're indebted to them, and they have continued to be involved with the garden, as you'll see, as we'll hear, I'll talk more about. The picture on the left is basically showing how the garden got started. So we had a group of really wonderful volunteers. I'm not, I'm an amateur gardener at best. So I would not have been able to do this on my own. So from the start, and we have relied on community volunteers to help us build and maintain the garden. But the first phase of the garden involved these planter boxes and a boardwalk, a wooden boardwalk that wrapped around the staircase of the house. And it was very simple. We grew peppermint and spearmint and a few other things. And then we moved to the second phase of expansion. And that's represented by the two pictures on the left, on the right. So those are two of the three beds that are pictured here. And that's what it looks like today. The three beds are each represent a different kind of aspect of herbal medicine. One bed is dedicated to Native American plants. Another bed are primarily Mediterranean herbs and some herbs from Asia that were introduced to the New World through colonial settlement. And then the third bed represents many of the herbs that were used by midwives for centuries during the period when they were primarily responsible for women's health care, not only delivering babies, but a whole range of things such as early child care and relationship counseling and reproductive health. They offered advice and services in many of these areas until about the 1920s. That's when you saw kind of a shift toward OBGYN professionals and hospital care for these services. Although more recently, midwifery is staging a kind of a comeback. And so today, for the past few years, people have been able to take an exam and from a state board and get licensed as a lay midwife and attend to births in a home for the first time in like 40 years. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of highlight the history of midwifery, is because it has played such an important role in healthcare and continues to do so. Next slide, please. Another aspect of the garden are these sculptural portraits. So there are two of them shown here. We have a third one that's part of the museum collection inside the house. And hopefully we'll be able to add more to the garden in the future. But these were made by a local artist, April Livingston, who is currently the treasurer of our board, and has been a wonderful resource for the an advisor to the museum. The series of sculptural portraits is meant to draw attention to people who traditionally have been left out of the history books and public monuments, on medicine and healthcare. And so we're talking about people of color, indigenous people, again, midwives without formal training, but they have played such an important role in the history, and the Mobile Medical Museum wants to recognize the history as a whole, as a broad cultural movement, not just focus on institutions like medical schools and great careers, but everybody who has had a role to play. So on the left, you see a bust of Bessie McGee. Bessie McGee lived about 100 years ago, and she was a member of the Porch Creek Indian community, tribal leader, and is fondly remembered as an ancestor today. And she was a midwife and traditional healer, had an extensive knowledge of indigenous herbs that were used in that community. And this was important because at the time, indigenous people, particularly the people of the Porch Creek community, were actually forbidden to use segregated hospitals, healthcare clinics, and businesses in that region. And so they often had to rely on their own traditions of medicine that had been passed down from generation to generation. And so Bessie McGee was an important keeper of that knowledge. If you come to the museum and you visit the garden, you look up close, you can see that Bessie, around her head, she's wearing a garland of 3 different herbs that were, part of their tradition: greenbrier or smilax, wild rose, and rabbit tobacco. We don't currently have those herbs in the garden, but we may add them later on. The one on the right, the sculpture on the right, is called Motherwork, and it's a circle of hands that were cast from the hands of real practicing midwives and obstetric nurses from around the state of Alabama. And this sculpture is adjacent to the midwifery bed. And it's, again, a tribute to all that they have contributed to healthcare. The title Motherwork comes from a quote from a sociologist named Patricia Hill Collins, who's basically talking about how the work of midwives demonstrates a different relationship between you and the community. Basically, your neighbor's health and your neighbor's children's health, you see that as your responsibility, and you see that as interconnected with your own health and the health of your loved ones. And I think that's such an important lesson. And it's something
what they say, it takes a village, and
right, exactly. So and so many midwives even today are that lived a few generations back, but they're fondly remembered today because they embodied this ethic of personal responsibility to the entire community. And they helped people who could not even afford to pay them, and they took alternative forms of payment, and they did whatever they could to help people raise healthy children. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have a compost bin. And so, I should mention that the Robert Thrower Medicinal Garden is part of a network of community gardens all across Mobile. And this compost bin was added as part of an initiative called Keep Mobile Beautiful. But basically, it's open to the public. Anyone can come and drop off their organic waste products to the compost, which helps to nourish and seed our garden. So it's part of the cycle of life, and we're happy to kind of be a good example to the community that way.
That's great. That is wonderful. And composting is so important too. I know Tarrant and I think we did a whole episode of what's going on composting once. So that's on our YouTube and our Facebook page. So check that out when you get a chance. But that's great to know that other people from the community can come and drop off their organic stuff and have it return to the environment. So wonderful.
So real quick, Darren, so
yes,
with what you accept in the compost bin, you're basically uncooked veggie scraps,
Yeah,
eggshells, coffee grounds, things like that, but no milk or meat or cheese or anything like that, correct?
that's right. Yes, exactly. And that compost bin is located toward the end of our driveway. The garden and the compost bin are both open to visitors pretty much 7 days a week during daylight hours. Even when the museum is closed, you can come by and pick what you want from the garden and take it home with you. You can use the compost, and so we really see that this project as a community resource.
That's wonderful.
Okay, next slide, please. So now I want to transition and talk about some of the stories that we tell through the garden. Museums are all about object-based learning, telling stories of the past and present, sometimes even the future, through objects. And the garden is that's part of what we do. And one of the great things about our garden is that it's very flexible. You can tell a variety of stories through these plants that might not be always evident to people, but I'm sure some of you experienced gardeners out there know how much you can learn about the past through knowledge of horticultural traditions. So anyway, one story that we like to tell is about the Columbian Exchange. And this is a term that historians use to refer to the contact between the people of the peoples of Europe, the Old World, New World, the Americas. And obviously, so it encompasses not just Christopher Columbus, but also all the early explorers. And obviously, we all know that there were a lot of dark sides to this contact. Things like slavery and disease and genocide. And we don't shy away from that side of it. But this was, for centuries, there was a very complex very complex history of cultural and knowledge exchange between different indigenous tribes and different European settlers. And part of that exchange involved the exchange of food traditions and crops. So here's some examples. The picture on the upper left is a climax blueberry. The blueberry was introduced to Europeans by Native Americans. They had used it for many, many generations as a food, as medicine. It was made into cough syrup. They used it as a pigment for decorating their clothing and their bodies. In fact, there's a legend. I'm not sure if this has been, documented or not, but there's a legend that a dish made from blueberries was served at the first Thanksgiving. And so this is what the Wampanoag Indians brought with them. But the dish was called sawitawtig, and it's a type of cornmeal pudding made with blueberries, and you can look up the recipe online. Another example is the chili pepper. That's the picture in the center. The chili pepper, this one is a Serrano actually, and I've had Serrano peppers from our garden. We've made salsa from it. If you like spicy hot food, it's which I do, you can't go wrong with Serranos. But the chili pepper again was introduced to Christopher Columbus by the indigenous people of South and Central America, Mexico, Bolivia, current day Bolivia, and Columbus called them peppers because of the spicy heat that you get from them, which reminded him of the peppercorn, which was a recent crop that came to Europe through the spice trade. And Columbus and other European explorers brought peppers back to Europe, and then eventually the Portuguese introduced them to Asia. And so this is a great example of how this contact between Europeans and Native Americans really affected the biodiversity and the horticultural practices of the entire world, because peppers are today, such an important component of the cuisines of Asia. Two last examples. The plant on the right is the dwarf yaupon, and the yaupon bush, holly bush, is the only known plant indigenous to North America that is caffeinated, and it was used as a ceremonial tea by many different tribes, including the Creek. And so much of the medicinal practices of the indigenous people had, both a and if they were supposed to have an effect on your body, but also your spirit. And this ritual of drinking this ceremonial tea was supposed to purify your body and your soul. And it was particularly in many tribes, it was partaken by, it was done by the male warriors of the tribe to give them strength in battle. It was also a symbol of friendship between different peoples. So a lot of times French and Spanish explorers would encounter these native people, and they would be invited back to their villages and invited to partake in this tea drinking ceremony. And that's how come we have many writings, travel writings by these explorers testifying to this. To them, it seemed a very strange ritual, because at the end of the tea drinking ceremony, the warriors would all stand up and basically they would vomit in a long projectile. It was kind of like a competition, and that from that we get the scientific name that the Europeans gave this plant, Ilex vomitoria. And for a long time, it was assumed that this herb was a type of emetic, that it contained some kind of chemical to induce vomiting. But today we know that is not the case. So there are different theories about what caused this vomiting. Was there some ingredient added to it? Was it just something that the warriors did as part of this purifying ritual? We don't know. We know that a lot of people today make yaupon tea, and it does not cause vomiting, and so it's safe. It's made, the tea, by the way, is made from the leaves and the branches of the herb. The berries, the red berries that you can see in that sign, are poisonous. They're toxic, so you don't want to eat those. And then we get, as the last example, the camellia tea in the bottom. So that is Camellia sinensis, rather. Sinensis is the Latin word for China. So this is an example of an herb that was brought to the New World by Europeans. The Europeans, in this, again, during the spice trade, they encountered camellia tea that was used in China and in India. The English, to compete with the Dutch, they began cultivating the camellia on their plantations in the colonies. And so that's how camellia kind of found its way to this part of the world. And of course, we all know the story of the Boston Tea Party, which made tea drinking very unpopular for a while. But eventually, tea became a really popular cash crop, and was reputed for its health benefits. All the different varieties of tea, or most of them, that we drink in the West, everything from Earl Grey tea to oolong tea, even to green tea, comes primarily from the camellia. And so this was a hugely important crop that came to the New World from Asia. Next slide.
Okay, so I have
Yes.
a quick question. So what was and you may have already said this, and I apologize, what was the medicinal purpose for the chili peppers? Were they?
So the chili, well, I can't speak to the to how they were, how it was used medicinally by indigenous people.
Mhm.
But what I will say is that peppers are, they're extremely nutritious. They're high in vitamin C, vitamin A, B, and E. They have lots of antioxidants. They're kind of like a superfood,
Yeah.
in that
And if
way.
you get one spicy enough, they'll clear your sinuses right on up.
Yes. And so the chemical that causes the heat, capsaicin,
Mhm.
it can increase your metabolism. It can even switch off pain signals.
Oh,
And
okay.
so there are lots of reputed, again, I'm not a medical doctor.
Right.
You saw our disclaimer, but there are a lot of reputed health benefits from including peppers in your diet. The Serrano pepper, by the way, has on the Scoville scale of heat,
Mhm.
it scores between 5,000 and 15,000 Scovilles, which can be about 3 to 5 times hotter than jalapenos.
Oh,
And it's a common ingredient in sriracha and hot sauces. So, during the colonial era, this is another story that we tell. Prior to germ theory, the medical establishment taught that human health was all based on the system of the 4 humors, and your
Mhm.
body had to be kept in a natural state of balance. And it could be, if it was thrown off, they would put you on a special diet. So every disease was classified, in this system as being either a hot disease or a cold disease, a dry disease or a wet disease. And so if you had like a cold, dry disease like constipation, your physician or your healthcare provider, your mother, maybe your grandmother, would give you foods that were the opposite qualities. So hot and wet foods like wine and peppers. And so that's an example of how they would have been used in the colonies at the time.
That's fascinating. So, all right. Well, cool. Well, very cool. Thank you. That's really interesting. And camellias, I had no idea. I have about 35 camellia just all over my yard. So
And I was going to ask that question too. So the camellia in the picture, that's not quite what mine look like. They're a little bit different. And obviously it's a different variety. So is it all varieties of camellias that are in that family? So there is a specific variety that is used for teas and things like that.
That's right. So after the English, and I don't know all about camellias, but after the English kind of didn't take over, but after they appropriated the camellia as a cash crop, many of the Asian countries began to grow other cultivars. And some of them were primarily ornamental. And so, not all of them are used for the tea.
okay, that's good to know. like we said in our disclaimer, don't go out and pick your camellia bush and leaves and trying to make tea out of them. Just probably not a good idea. So. All right, moving on.
Yeah. So another story that we tell is kind of the transition from traditional medicine to pharmaceutical science. And I'm very careful to say that this transition is not, it's not a complete one. In other words, traditional medicine still survives today. There are people that swear by it. There are people that practice it all over the world. By traditional medicine, I'm talking about anything that's outside of the mainstream or outside of conventional medicine. You could also use the term alternative medicine. But traditional medicine dates back, tens of thousands of years. We like to say that this was, really the oldest medicine ever. So, long before there were hospitals and medical schools, and pharmaceutical labs, this was medicine. People growing products in their garden and turning them into teas and ointments and such. And so here are three examples: Comfrey, Lemongrass, and Yarrow. How are we doing on time, by the way? Because I want to make sure we get through everything.
You're fine. You're good.
Okay. So just a few things about these plants. So Yarrow is on the right, very ancient herb. It's there's a legend that Yarrow was given by the Greek hero Achilles to his troops in the Trojan War to help heal their wounds. And that's where the scientific name comes from, Achilles millefolium. It was also known to many of the native people of the Americas, the Navajo, the Ojibwe, the Pawnee, the Cherokee. And so it's not, it's grown in North America, Asia, and Europe. It's native to those places. You can find it in health food stores today, and drug stores. It's an essential oil. Its essential oil is called Yarrow. And so again, this is an example of a very ancient remedy that continues to be used by many people today as an anti-inflammatory, treatment, and for many other uses. Lemongrass in the middle. Many people know of lemongrass if you like Asian cooking. Again, it's a common ingredient in many cuisines, but it also has a medicinal history. This particular one is West Indian lemongrass, and it's native to Southeast Asia. There are a lot of herbs that have this. It's not related to the lemon tree. A lot of herbs have this lemony citrus scent to them. Lemon, we also have lemon thyme in our garden. That's another one. If you pick it up and rub it against your fingers, you'll get that, kind of very similar. It'll remind you of lemon. So that's where the name comes from. And that actually comes from a chemical called citral, which is used in many household cleaners and insect repellents. And citral can be found in other plants as well, but it's in lemongrass. Lemongrass is high in antioxidants. It's reputed to have antibacterial, antifungal, and fever-reducing qualities. Lemongrass oil is used as a topical agent to heal minor wounds and skin blemishes. So this is one that, again, has survived. And then Comfrey has a very interesting history. It's native to Britain and is found also in Europe and Asia. But this would have been an example of something that the Pilgrims might have brought with them to the Americas. It's found in some of the oldest European herbal manuals. And the roots were made into a syrup that was ingested orally for treatment of internal bleeding. It was also used to make a compress for wounds and relieve the pain of bruises and sprains. It was also given to animals as animal feed, and apparently it was given as a substitute for potatoes during the Great Famine in Ireland. Now, this is an example of an ancient herb that has been clinically tested. That doesn't mean you should use it on my recommendation, but some of the plants in our garden, have lots of healing qualities associated with them, and some of them have gone through clinical trials to see, if anything can be gleaned from that, if there's any scientific evidence that it has the effects that it claims to have. And this is one that where we have some positive clinical results. So there are several active components in Comfrey. One is allantoin, and rosmarinic acid is another one. And so that's what is believed to have these, this benefit for healing pain and bleeding, internal bleeding.
Okay.
On the other hand, parts of the plant can be toxic when taken orally, which is why you shouldn't go out and self-treat yourself, if you don't know exactly what you're doing. So the roots of the plant are no longer recommended because they contain these alkaloids that can be toxic if they're ingested. So anyway, yeah. as we go through the garden, we talk about how some of the extracts from these plants have been made more potent through various processes in pharmaceutical labs. And today you can find links between some of these ancient herbs and medicines that that are prescribed in the form of pills or or oral medicine. Another example of that is aspirin, which comes from white willow. So that's just another story that we tell through the garden.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. And they're actually beautiful plants too. I mean, they're really pretty.
That's right. And
yeah.
and three, I'm glad you mentioned that, because these are all part of the midwifery garden.
Mhm.
And another aspect of the practice of midwives is to make a sick room, create the right atmosphere, the right healing, relaxing atmosphere in a sick room for the patient, so that they are prepared for labor, or for some kind of or it could be for healing them after childbirth. And so a lot of midwives took these aromatic herbs like lemongrass, and they would use a humidifier, create a mist that would pervade the room and help to relax the patient and put them in kind of the right frame of mind.
Wonderful. Well, that's really fascinating. And speaking of midwifery,
yeah. So here's some other examples of that. Going back to what we were saying before about how midwifery is a type of healthcare practice that is usually passed down informally, like through mentorships, right? And so one result of that is that you get these histories that go back thousands of years. You get traditional midwife practices that are still with us today, that go back to the medieval era, or the ancient times, and these are some good examples of that. So sage on the left, common sage is I just need to plug in my phone so we don't get disconnected. Hang on a second.
No problem.
All right. You can still see me, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So common sage is from the Mediterranean region. It was known to the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians. And it has it has a wide range of medical properties as well as magical properties. So when you're talking about the pre-modern era, the history of medicine often overlaps with the history of magic, the history of spirituality. All of these things were connected. And that's what makes it such a rich subject to study. But sage was used to heal wounds and throat ailments, and ailments of the digestive system. It was used to improve the memory, to improve fertility. In fact, in the 9th century, the French ruler, Emperor Charlemagne, he felt that sage was one of the most prized medicines you could find. And so he founded this medical school at Salerno. And sage was known there as the salvation plant. And that's where it gets its Latin name, Salvia officinalis.
Oh. The official
now,
salvation.
Yeah. And sage tea, you can make a tea out of it. It was exported from France to China. Now, I want to make it clear that what we're looking at here is common sage, which has gray or green leaves. That's not to be confused with white sage, which is native to North America, and that's used in a lot of indigenous ceremonies. You may have heard the term smudging.
Yes.
But that's the white sage
Okay.
that's used in that.
Okay.
So
Dill.
Sorry, before you
Go
move
ahead.
on, so sage, and just kind of back to how you mentioned just related to the history of magic and spirituality and things like that, and you mentioned the rubbing, but there's also the practice of burning sage. And
Yeah,
is that also the white sage?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, I think that's what smudging
Right.
is. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's the burning of the white
Yes.
sage?
burning of the,
Yeah.
okay.
Exactly. So dill. This is one of my favorites because it's just, well, I have to admit, I'm kind of a in my youth, in my younger years, I was a fantasy nerd. So I'm really, whenever I come across an herb that, that has these like magical, reputed magical properties, I get really excited. But dill is related to the celery family. It's native to Eurasia. So again, it was kind of imported here. And the seeds of the dill plant were used to ease stomach pains and digestive problems. But another interesting part of this plant is that the name dill comes from an old Saxon word, dillon, which means to comfort. And apparently the aroma of the dill plant, again, going back to what I was saying about how a lot of these herbs were used to, you would use today we would call it a nebulizer, but it would be, like put it in a pot and, mix it with water, and, the mist would pervade the room. This is how dill was often prepared. The aroma of dill was used to protect nurseries from evil spirits at night. And it was also a very common ingredient in magic spells and potions to protect against witchcraft. So again, this would have been a common recipe, known to midwives, to physicians, to people with this kind of knowledge. And you can see how witchcraft, accusations of witchcraft were often aimed at women who had this herbal knowledge, because so many of these plants had these purported magical powers. And finally, the chaste tree on the right. So this plant is called, the Latin name is Vitex agnus castus, and it dates back to ancient Greece and Rome. Again, it was at the time used to prepare an herbal tea that was given to women to help their menstrual health and milk flow. So apparently it was supposed to have some effect on your hormones. As these ancient medical manuals were rediscovered in medieval Europe, not medieval Europe, in the Renaissance era, rather, the early modern era, it's called. Somehow the reputation of the herb got a little bit turned around, and herbalists of the Renaissance era were recommending, you know, the tea from this plant as a kind of anaphrodisiac. So you would give it to your partner if they were getting too wild and going out and carousing and cheating on you and drinking too much. And it was supposed to like rein them in and cool down their passions. And that's
Make
how
them
it
a
got
little more
its,
chaste.
yeah, that's how it got its name, the chaste tree. And that reputation kind of survived into the modern era, you know, so you can imagine like somebody going to a midwife with relationship issues and them, you know, giving them the, you know, a prescription for, it could be used as an herbal tea, or you could also cut a branch off and have the patient carry around the branch as like a talisman. Yeah, have it work its magic on you. So
Okay.
all right.
That's
So
pretty
those
interesting.
are some of the stories that we tell through the garden,
Yeah.
and it's really fun. A lot of people find these stories entertaining and provocative, and so the garden has become a really important part of our tour program, and I see it as kind of like an outdoor exhibition area.
Mhm.
Here we see several examples of how we've used the garden programmatically. As I mentioned, we give tours, and these tours on these tours, I share some of the stories that I talked about on this you know, on this episode today. But we also do STEM experiments. So the picture on the lower left is of a class from the Evergreen Workforce Development Center. And what they're doing is they are testing the pH levels of different soil samples from the garden. And then we relate that to how pH testing is used in medicine, in like urine tests, and to determine, to diagnose certain health conditions. The picture on the lower right is our junior med camp group from a few years ago, and they're learning how to make an herbal tea from one of our master gardeners, Pat Hall, who, you know, very, very big help with the garden, Pat has been. We also have a recurring program partnership with 3 partners, the Full Life Ahead Foundation, Master Gardeners of Mobile County, and the Mobile Urban Growers, on a bi-monthly horticultural therapy program for adults with intellectual disabilities. And so they come and they and they, you know, work with people in the community and their families to you know, learn about planting and learn about nutrition and you know, enjoy the outdoors, and we love to have them here. And finally, we have last year we launched a new series that we hope to bring back soon called Poetry in the Garden. In November, we had a poet and creative writing professor from the University of South Alabama. Her name is Charlotte. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Just blanking on the name for a minute. Charlotte Pence. Great poet. she had just published a new book of poems that actually relates to her experience with cancer in her family, and also using innovative DNA technologies to like CRISPR. I don't know if some of you may have heard of that, to to treat disease. And so she read poems from her book to we had a great crowd that laid out blankets on the front lawn, and we loved having them here. We're planning to do more events in the garden area, more outdoor events, particularly since we're still dealing with COVID, and a lot of people don't like to avoid large gatherings indoors, and so this gives them something to do to get out of the house in a safe way.
Yeah, that's great, Darren. Thank you so much for this. What you do, just not just in the garden, but with the whole medical museum, it's just fascinating. And if you are in the Mobile area, I highly encourage you to go visit. It really is fascinating, the history of it. Darren is an amazing tour guide through it all, and it's really just a fun thing to look for. And I know that y'all got some bigger and better things even in the future for the garden and the museum, so that's exciting. And yeah, and I think at this point, does anybody have any questions? You're welcome to come off mute, or you can put them in the chat. But we do have Darren's email address down there, admin@mobilemedicalmuseum.org. So if it's a question you'd like to email him about, or if you're like me and think of a million questions after the program is over with, you can give him a shout out and ask him whatever your questions may be. So does anybody have any questions?
I was going to just ask one, and you may have mentioned this already, Darren, but so as far as exhibits, are there fixed exhibits, and then are there some that maybe you are specialties that run for a certain period of time?
Yeah, the medical museum has a permanent collection that covers over 300 years of medical history from the colonial era to the recent past. We have an iron lung in our collection. We have a functional heart-lung machine that was used on the first bypass surgeries in Mobile. So our permanent collection is a great way for people to learn about history, about medical history, whether they are students, practitioners, or lay people and just interested in those subjects. And then we also do special exhibits on particular subjects. Dorothy mentioned some of them at the beginning of the talk. Our next one coming up is called, we try to do those about once a year. Sometimes we do them in partnership with other organizations and make use so that we can share their resources as well. And sometimes we curate them ourselves. And so the next one that we're doing is called Seedlings, A History of Pediatric Care. And so that will be opening probably later this month.
Great.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And I also wanted to just throw in that we're always looking for volunteers.
Yes.
The garden needs weeding. We need weeding help. You see here one of our gardening volunteers helping us, but people of all ages. It's a great way to exercise and enjoy the fresh air, and and be a part of the community. So if you're interested in helping with the garden in that way or any other way, if you have special knowledge that you want to share with us, you can email me and reach out to us.
That'd be great. Yes. And we actually have someone with their hand raised, Marge Stevens. If you can come off of mute, you are welcome to ask your question. Let's see, let's get you off of mute there. Hang on. There you go.
Okay, I wasn't going to ask a question, but I wanted to say how wonderful and interesting this program was. And when I come down to Gulf Shores for 5 days in August, I'm going to do my best to go down to Mobile to see the gardens and the museum. Thank you so very much.
Yes.
Very interesting, and I learned a lot. I would like to hear it again. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Miss Marge. Well, we would love to have you down here. So do you live in Alabama? Where are
Yes,
you?
I live in Auburn.
Okay, great, great.
I live in Auburn. So yeah, thank you. This is just so interesting.
Well, thank you. Well, Darren's really, really good at what he does. And he,
Yeah.
and like I said, the museum, just, not just the garden, but the museum itself is really fascinating. So
Yeah,
we do
that's
hope you
cool.
make it down and you're able to visit.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? You're welcome to take yourself off of mute. Ask in the chat. You can email Darren later. All right. Well, folks, again, I really appreciate you joining us today. If you have any workshop ideas, anything you'd like to hear us cover, we're pretty much interested in anything and everything that has to do with plants. Please feel free to email me or Terrence with any ideas. We are going to take a short hiatus over July. I actually may post on our AARP Facebook page. I may post a few of our past recordings just to keep y'all interested so you won't miss us too much. But I do want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Darren Glassbrook for joining us. We really appreciate it, Darren. This has been really fascinating. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great to be with you.
Great. And I hope that you all get a chance to go see the Mobile Medical Museum, their garden. Like we said, they've always got stuff going in the works. Darren's always working really hard on the continuation of developing and making things bigger and better. And so we're really excited to see some things that are coming in the future. And yeah, like I said, again, thanks for joining us, Darren. Terrence, as always, thank you for being here and co-hosting. And Darren, again, you're just a wealth of information. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dorothy. Take care.
You
Thank
too.
you.
All right. Well, with that, folks, we are ending our meeting. So everyone have a great day. This has been recorded. It'll be on our YouTube page, AARP Alabama's YouTube page, and you will be able to view that probably in the next couple of days. It's going to take me a little while to get that uploaded, but I'll get it done. So thank you, everyone.